Hello, my name is Jim Toot, and I'm an Associate Professor of Political Science at Central Virginia Community College. In this video, part one of American Government and Civic Engagement will discuss what is politics and the American government. So what is politics? There are many definitions. Harold Lasswell described politics as the process of resolving conflicts and deciding who gets what, when, and how. Politics has been called the art or science of government, the art or science concerned with guiding or influencing governmental policy, the art or science concerned with winning and holding control over a government, and the process of peacefully reconciling social and economic differences. Aristotle refers to politics as the master science, a means by which people with different views and interests could strive for collective survival and advancement. Many have referred to it as the necessary science. Clausewitz described politics as the womb in which war develops, and war as politics by other means. The American Civil War is an example of the cost associated with the failure of politics. The diverse interest of over 300 million Americans of all sexes, races, religions, means, and ages living in rural, suburban, and urban areas make the resolution of the debates over who gets what, when, and how a difficult one. Many government decisions are economic in nature, affecting the production, distribution, and consumption of wealth. The U.S. government is projected to spend more than $6.1 trillion in 2022 and will not spend enough capital to satisfy all the demands and expectations placed upon it. In fiscal year 2020-2021, confronted with the COVID-19 pandemic, estimated and projected U.S. government spending accounts for about $7.25 trillion, or 31% of the U.S. gross domestic product. Most, although not all, people support issues that promote their self-interest. Politicians must resolve the conflicts. Not everyone, possibly no one, is satisfied. A number of different forms of government have been identified. Governments with aristocratic attributes are traditionally ruled by the best people. Aristocracy refers to the rule by elite citizens, a system of governance in which a person who rules in an aristocracy is an aristocrat. It has come to mean rule by the aristocracy, people of noble birth. A meritocracy refers to rule by the meritorious, a system of governance where people are selected on the basis of people's ability, knowledge in a given area, and contributions to society. A technocracy refers to rule by the educated, a system of governance where people who are skilled or proficient in their respective areas of expertise and technology are in control of all decision-making. Doctors, engineers, scientists, professionals, and technologists who have the knowledge, expertise, or skills would compose the governing body instead of politicians, people in business, and economists. Governments with autocratic attributes are ruled by one person who has all the power over the people in a country. The Roman Republic made dictators lead during times of war. In modern times, an autocrat's rule is not stopped by any rule of law, constitutions, or other social and political institutions. After World War II, many Latin American, Asian, and African nations were ruled by autocrats. Governments with democratic attributes are the most common in the Western world and in some countries of the East. In democracies, all of the people in a country can vote during elections for representatives or political parties that they prefer. The people in democracies can elect representatives who will sit on legislatures, such as the Parliament or Congress. Political parties are organizations of people with similar ideas about how a country or region should be governed. Different political parties have different ideas about how the government should handle different problems. Democracy is the government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Direct democracy is a form of democracy in which people vote on policy initiatives directly. This is different from representative democracy, in which people vote for representatives who then vote on policy initiatives. Depending on the particular system in use, it might entail passing executive decisions, making laws, directly electing or dismissing officials, and conducting trials. Governments with monarchic attributes are ruled by a king or a queen who inherit their position from their family, which is often called the royal family. There are two different types of monarchies: absolute monarchies and constitutional monarchies. In an absolute monarchy, the ruler has no limits on their wishes or powers. In a constitutional monarchy, the ruler's powers are limited by a document called a constitution. Governments with oligarchic attributes are ruled by a small group of powerful and/or influential people. These people may spread power equally or not equally. It differs from a true democracy because very few people are given the chance to change things. An oligarchy does not have to be hereditary or monarchic and does not have one clear ruler but several powerful people. Some historical examples include the former Union of Soviet Socialist Republics and South Africa during apartheid. Capitalism. Capitalism is an economic system based on private ownership of property and free economic competition among individuals and businesses, often referred to as the marketplace. So is the U.S. economy purely capitalistic? Most decisions about economics in the U.S. are left to the marketplace, but the U.S. does not practice pure capitalism. Restrictions include child labor laws, minimum wage laws, environmental regulations. The government has, since the beginning, provided certain infrastructure such as schools, roads, and hospitals. Since the 1930s, the government has provided certain benefits for the elderly, poor, disabled, and unemployed. The U.S. is experiencing an increase in the number of elderly and unemployed, increased military spending, increasing political dissent over taxation. The challenge of resolving differences and compromising has become formidable. Politics also involves debate over how political ideas and values should be reflected in our nation's laws and political institutions. Ideology, or political ideas, are sets of ideas concerning the proper political system under which people should live. Why government? Politics is a process, however, government is the set of organizations within which much of that process takes place. Government can be defined as the political and administrative organization of a state, nation, or locality. In the U.S. case, the framers summarized this in one sentence in the preamble of the Constitution. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. Let's look at the preamble a little more closely. To establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, and secure the blessings of liberty. Government is essential to ensure restraint and decency among people. In the absence of the sovereign or government, life among individuals would be solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. To provide for the common defense. Governments must protect their citizens against threats from other societies or governments. To promote the general welfare. Government undertakes or subsidizes enterprises considered too massive for private undertaking, such as dams, protecting the wilderness, providing for the needy, schools, the space program, and so forth. Such enterprises are collective goods available for the benefit of all citizens, whether or not they pay taxes to support them. Collective goods can be defined as something of value that by its nature can be made available only to everybody or not to anyone at all. Advocates for a positive state argue that the government should play an active role in providing goods, services, and conditions for a prosperous and equitable society. Advocates for a minimalist state argue that the government is too inefficient and coercive and should be restricted to producing only goods that the free market cannot provide. So what is democracy as we define it today? Democracy is a system of government based on majority rule, protection of minority and individual rights, and the equality of all citizens before the law. But these principles can come into conflict with one another. How did the founders resolve this? By drafting a constitution. Constitutionalism is the belief in limited government power by a written charter. The U.S. government plays a much larger role in the lives of its citizens today than 230 years ago. With a $6.1 trillion budget, 2.1 million federal employees, and federal regulations, it's much larger than any corporation. And everyone who earns income must pay some form of taxes. Politics and government pervade American society, economy, and culture. In summary, politics is about the resolution of conflict in society. Conflicts frequently arise over resource allocation and value preferences. Politicians at their best find compromise among these issues where none seem available. Government is essential to a civilized society. Its tasks are to ensure a peaceful society, to provide for the national defense, to secure basic freedoms, and to undertake cooperative enterprises for the general welfare. American democracy provides for a government based on the consent of the governed, the protection of individual rights, and the equality of its citizens before the law. The U.S. Constitution, the basic charter of this government, preserves the principle of government under law. In contemporary America, the tasks of the government are extensive and varied. For example, in 2022, the national government is expected to spend more than $6.1 trillion, more than 25% of the U.S. gross domestic product, a larger percentage if we include additional job creation resulting from federal spending, and its activities pervade society. All Americans are directly affected by the policies and choices of government. Let's go over a few commonly heard terms. Deficit and surplus. The difference between the money the government takes in called receipts and what the government spends called outlays each year. When there is a deficit, the U.S. Treasury must borrow the money needed to pay its bills. Let's say the U.S. government is estimated to collect blank $1 trillion in tax revenues and spend a total of blank $1 trillion. This will result in either a deficit or surplus. Tax revenues minus spending equal a deficit if the number is negative, and a surplus if the number is positive. Debt, on the other hand, is the cumulative total of money owed due to U.S. government borrowing to cover all annual deficits. Another term to consider is pluralism, or competition among groups. Briefly stated, pluralism is the theory that competition among interest groups produces compromise and balance among competing policy preferences. For pluralists, the abundance of interest groups, the competition between them, and their representation of interest in society are inherent in American democracy. Bargaining between groups and ever-changing group alliances achieve a desirable dispersion of power, or at least an acceptable balancing of the various interests in society. Pluralists acknowledge that some groups might dominate areas where their interests are paramount, but they believe two factors rectify this situation. In overlapping membership, people belonging to several interest groups encourage negotiation and compromise, and underrepresented people will in time establish groups to assert their interests. This notion of pluralism points to the reasons citizens must be engaged in American politics. We will discuss civic engagement in the next video.